All right, everybody, welcome back. It's Elite Business Live 2026. And if you thought that TikTok was something just for the kids, or indeed just for certain sectors, then maybe this section will help you to think again. We're going to be joined on stage by Ed Gilmartin, who's a partnerships lead at TikTok Shop UK. But first, it is a pleasure to welcome the business development lead at TikTok Shop. Please give it up for George Ma. Hey, George.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, I'm genuinely all ears because this is something that I've trod on eggshells around, not wanting to misstep or make a fool of myself. What's something about TikTok that not all of our viewers might know?
There are a couple of things that really surprised me when I moved to TikTok that are very fast. One, so I look after FMCG, so this is a category deep to my heart. But about 8% of the UK's toilet roll is sold on TikTok Shop, which is an extraordinarily high percentage when you think about it.
That is absolutely, is that right?
Yeah, partly because you can buy it about 120 rolls at a time. And a lot of people I don't know where they've got space for it. The other just, you asked one, I'll give you another, is that the demographic group that spends the most on TikTok Shop is women over the age of 35. So it is not just the sort of the Gen Z powerhouse app that so many people believe.
Right, well, look, with that toilet roll metaphor in mind, we will wait for more facts to unravel before our very eyes. We'll leave you in the capable hands, everybody. George Ma.
Thank you, Ollie.
Yeah.
Thanks again. Now, I'll put myself behind the lectern so I don't get too in the way of the slides, which will do stuff as we go. This will be a bit of a session of two halves. I'm going to try and give everyone a bit of a 101 into what TikTok Shop is, because I know Ollie asked the question before about how many people are actively on it or if they're using it for their business. And there were hands, but certainly not all of them. So my aim from my part of the session is that everyone understands the basic principles. How does TikTok Shop fit into that broader TikTok ecosystem? And how could it be valuable for your business? Then my delightful colleague, Ed, will come and join us later and talk a little bit more about partly how TikTok is becoming really an impressions engine and driving growth and sales both on and off our platform, and also how we're sort of supercharging our ad products with AI and making it much simpler to drive growth for your business with ads. So let's get into it. It'll be news to nobody that TikTok really is a global phenomenon, and we've got over 1 billion monthly active users globally. It's the fastest growing and has been for quite some time social platform that's out there. But the piece I'm really excited about is how it's also building an entirely new way of doing commerce online. We're going to call it discovery commerce. You're going to know better what we mean by this shortly. You can imagine that a lot of that 1 billion is in Southeast Asia, but this is obviously an enormous platform in Western markets as well. You know, we have over 160 million monthly active users in Europe, of which well over 30 million of those are in the UK. And I thought it would be quite valuable to just take a look through that age breakdown. The monthly active users is total users of the platform. Here we're looking really at our TikTok Shop user base age breakdown, where all of our customers are over the age of 18. And I think what's really interesting, and I touched on it there when Ollie asked me the question, is where so much of our growth is coming from is in that 35-plus age group. Because I know for a while, many brands have thought about TikTok in relatively simplistic terms, which is, this is a place that I need to activate if I want to reach a younger audience. And that is undeniably true, that our younger audiences are native to TikTok, really, and are often the most comfortable and in tune with using this for all manner of things, be it like governing much of their social life or buying things. But increasingly, we're seeing more and more of that purchase activity happening in those older age groups. And as I say, that really is fueling so much of our growth. But the breadth of our reach is one thing, but I think it's depth that blows people away. You can decide to be impressed or scared or horrified by the average time spent per day on the app in the UK. It's about 118 minutes, which is the equivalent to somebody watching an entire feature film on this app every day. So if you want to be where the eyeballs are, as you can see by the sort of dwell time in TikTok compared to apps or experiences where we know people have quite different user behaviors, TikTok is the place where people are spending their time. It has transformed the way people are engaging with entertainment, obviously. And entertainment really is the key here. When brands are thinking about TikTok and sort of imagining pinning their e-commerce chops onto a new platform, it can be easy to think about it like another e-com site, right, where you can go and list your products and then hope that you can sit back and wait for sales. But ultimately, this is an entertainment platform. And if you're not finding ways of making your content engaging, you're really not leading into the strengths of it. And so much of what drives this are the incredible micro communities around on TikTok that many of you would have heard of, right? Be it Book Talk or Clean Talk. We saw before TikTok Shop existed, so many people were discovering products and regimes or new ways of engaging with products on TikTok, and then they were going off to Amazon or to the direct-to-consumer website for that brand and making that purchase. And so really that behavior was a massive part of the genesis for us in creating TikTok Shop, which is how do we retain that customer's interest? How do we keep them in the app, but still let them convert on that cool thing that they've just watched? And we see that entertainment is key to cutting through. Right? A recent survey of Gen Zs and millennials predominantly said that entertaining content from brands on social media does make them more likely to purchase. And that's I'd put that in maybe the consideration part of our classic marketing funnel. But what we're increasingly seeing with TikTok Shop is it really is powering that entire, that full funnel, be it from that initial driving awareness and initial discovery, which I still think is the fundamental strength of TikTok Shop, is finding a way to get your product under the eyes of somebody that maybe wasn't necessarily looking for it. Something that is generally hard to do and often quite expensive to do, as we all know, of that part of customer acquisition. But the way that this comes to life on TikTok is you're able to better understand the product based on the content, maybe engage with a live and really get through that consideration phase and effortlessly convert. The number here that jumped out to me is at 92%. About 92% of users on TikTok take some kind of action after seeing a video on TikTok. So even if you're not making shoppable content, but just brand content, this is a place where you're winning hearts and minds and certainly getting mind share. So we call the title Discovery Commerce. We think of this as the next chapter of this e-commerce journey that we've been on, where the key part for us is actually bringing back a lot of the fun and the serendipity and joy of shopping that was often being lost with the classic e-commerce, right? Where it was often quite a search and scroll experience. I want to get a new pair of running shoes, and I might search for it in Google or Amazon or wherever. And then you're really on like a pretty joyless run through lists and lists of things, and finding which is the best product for you is not an entirely lovable experience. And what we get with TikTok is something that is a bit more akin to walking around a department store, where you might stumble upon something that you weren't necessarily looking for, or you might have an opportunity to talk to a really useful shop assistant, or in this case, like a live host, and ask some questions about the product and why it might be right for you, and really develop an understanding and maybe even develop conviction to purchase something that maybe you weren't planning on doing. As a customer, it feels risky. For a brand, it's incredibly valuable. And then so the way that this can appear for brands is it becomes this incredibly valuable flywheel, which really begins with engaging your community. And that might be your community of creators, or where you might say, send them some samples of a product. And they might make some content that is enjoyed by their communities, maybe some creators among them who buy it and they make some content too. And it massively amplifies the sheer act of engaging that initial creator. People will engage in it, and the algorithm falls in love with volume and engagement. And this sees more and more people looking to try, potentially make content for that particular brand. And it's a really virtuous flywheel that has enabled brands to grow substantially from zero, often being entirely platform native. So for those of you that are not on TikTok, and it's just possible there's one or two, I thought we'd just give you a little bit of an understanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about TikTok Shop. So this is a video of a tangle teaser, a hairbrush I absolutely swear by, which so this will often be on my For You page, which is the first sort of reel of videos that appears as you open the app. And where there's that little yellow icon in the bottom left-hand corner of the video, you'll see it shortly, there it is, that tells you that this is a shoppable video. And you can click on it, this detailed page arises, about 2 clicks later, and you're away, and you're right back to scrolling. And it's an incredibly unintrusive behavior, unintrusive experience. And unlike a lot of other social platforms, which typically redirect off-platform, this enables the customer to stay where they were, keep doing what they want to be doing, which is scroll and be entertained. There are 4 main ways that brands can engage with users across the platform. I'd say the 2 on the left here, the shoppable videos and live shopping, this is really where discovery happens. This is where maybe somebody that has no idea about your business or your product or your brand may find them for the first time, because you're really not in control. The algorithm dictates your destiny and decides what you see. Shoppable videos are right now, I would say, the beating heart of our business. Certainly for in the business I run, this is where most of our revenue comes from. People just engaging with those shoppable videos, where most of them come from affiliates rather than the brands themselves. So in that example I shared earlier, it's where the brand has sent a sample, often to a creator who makes the video, and they have their community, and that's what the brand is able to tap into. Live shopping is very much the core of our business in Southeast Asia, and it is growing at an incredible rate of knots in Western markets as well. It's roughly 10% of the FMCG business for me, but it really varies by categories. You can imagine beauty and fashion works really well in lives, where that ability to interact with the host and ask questions is super critical. Then Showcase and Shop Tab, this is more where you can engage with customers that may already have some kind of awareness or interest in your brand. So your Showcase, once you've got your shop live, is a sort of a shopping basket icon that appears on your handle. And this is a highly configurable view where customers can browse everything in your shop. And Shop Tab is far more interesting than I thought when I first joined, where I thought, oh, this is kind of like TikTok's Amazon that looks a bit chaotic, where you can search for things and do all the normal e-commerce stuff I'm used to. What I didn't appreciate initially was how tied in what you see on this page is to all of your other behavior. So for example, if I had been looking at that Tangle teaser on a video, perhaps I'd watched a couple of Tangle teaser videos, maybe I'd clicked into one of them and demonstrated some level of interest. I would be more likely to then see that beloved hairbrush on my shop tab. And so it's a super, super personalized experience. And this slide gives a bit of a sense of what it takes to be successful. And everything in red is basically the core requirements for any successful e-commerce brand. Your pricing needs to be tight. Your shipping promise needs to be compelling. Your image quality needs to be high. The SEO needs to be tight. All of that is bare bones. Everything in blue is really where you can amplify and get your head above the parapet, as it were, and be really successful. Now, a lot of brands I get a bit worried because they go, hey, I have no idea about this whole affiliate thing, or Lives is entirely new to me. And so it's not rare for brands, as they get started, to work with an agency, and there are many sort of certified agencies that we work with who can help give you guys a running start in any of those spaces. And it can simplify is this a marketing or a e-com or a sales part of my business, and take it away and run with it. Equally, most, I'd say, of our major shops do most of these things in-house, but there are many ways that you can flex with this. I wanted to spend a moment on Black Friday, which it probably makes a lot of people here wince because it's March, and it feels like a long way away, but it is always the focal point of the e-commerce calendar at this point, whether you love it or you loathe it. And we're really proud of the way that TikTok has changed how we engage with Black Friday. I think, with the short plotted history of this, when it was new to the UK and e-commerce, it was deeply exciting where you kind of knew where to look. There weren't so many places activating around it, and there were a few really big marquee deals, and you knew what good looked like. And over time, everyone's built on this in such a way that it is completely overwhelming, where there are just like deals everywhere. Gauging what is actually good for you or actually a good deal is very difficult. And on TikTok, I think largely through some highly engaging lives and people, again, an entertainment-focused approach, you're able to see what comes your way in a manner that is much less mind-numbing than it can be on other sites. And customers have responded incredibly well to it. So for us, these are some relatively recently published figures for us, that on TikTok in the UK, we had 27 items sold every second, which is over 2 million on that single day, and growing at a lick of over 50% year over year. So for a business at this scale to be growing at this growth rate is like it's a wild ride and super exciting. You may also notice that the live portion of our business is outgrowing the core. 70% or 68% year-over-year increase in live shopping sales. I think customers are increasingly finding this a really delightful place to buy, be it with lots of time-bound promotions or just simply the ability to interact with the host and get to know the product better before you buy it. Customers are really appreciating this, and I think more and more brands are leaning into it. And the other piece that I'd say is a big step change in the last 12 months is the types of brands that are showing up here. It's not rare that for a major new platform that initially you get the more socially native brands that lean in at first, but over time we're seeing big British high street retailers finding that this is the place that they need to be. So in the last few months, we've had M&S, Samsung, Sainsbury's. Honestly, at this stage, it feels like every day there's another major brand that's doing their big TikTok Shop launch, and customers are becoming used to or expecting to find the product that they want to buy to be available on TikTok. So just for a quick recap to level set of what does this all mean for you and your businesses, and how might you think about it? I'd say very simply, incremental sales is always going to be the most exciting part of this, right? With an audience this big, who are really lent into that e-commerce nature of the platform, this is great. The new audiences and new customer acquisition, I think, really is the heart of this. Many brands tell us that when they do a really big activation on TikTok, they still see the majority of their sales on their D2C or on Amazon. And so it fuels that growth, and we call it the TikTok Shop halo, but it fuels growth across their portfolio. And then the other part that I think should not be overlooked is being able to tap into this network of hundreds of thousands of creators that we have in the UK that can become your brand advocates. And they all have their communities who trust them and follow them. And that value of being spoken to by somebody you trust rather than the brand themselves, I think really is the core of what makes this community-led shopping so valuable. So I think how you market and make yourselves interesting to the creators and how you incubate that group is as important as how you position yourselves for customers. So I wanted to show a couple of examples very quickly around brands that have done some cool stuff that might inspire you. You may remember, I feel like this trend has mostly died out now. My sales tell me it's mostly died out now. But there was a moment where Dubai chocolate was the thing, and it was the new interesting, it had its viral moment. And Lidl thought it cool to find a way of leveraging TikTok to get a bit of hype around a new product launch that they had coming up in shops. So they would belatedly, I think they were the ones that sort of slightly killed this craze by the time they did it. It wasn't cool anymore. But it was cool for this moment where they did a discounted, limited drop of their new chocolate bar. Only 6,000 bars, but they were all gone in under a couple of hours. But they teased with a lot of creator content. They got people really excited about the fact that this was coming. And so the TikTok communities went wild for this thing. There was lots of, because it was exciting and new and different, it generated a load of content. And so the algorithm became very Lidl Dubai chocolate heavy. And it was incredibly effective at driving in-store traffic, which was really their core KPI, right? They make a small investment in a deep discount and engaging creators, but ultimately it was the halo that they were after. So a couple of things that I think they did that was cool that we can run through. I think about how you can leverage creators for more than just like generating that singular sale, but also showing up for those viral moments. Because although this is an always-on platform, this is not a platform that's really about virality. Those moments can really help supercharge the growth and build up that following. So some nice examples from the last year that we've seen. One, I think L'Oreal recently got a load of their top creators, their top influencers into their offices, because these guys are talking to their communities about their products, and they wanted to hear from them about which hooks were working, what are the product assortment gaps that they could be thinking about. So they had product development and marketing teams working hand in hand with these guys who really are their boots on the ground in many cases. We saw with other beauty brands, they looked at how creators were doing these kind of get ready with me videos and understanding beauty regimes in a way that enabled them to package and create bundles of products that they weren't otherwise doing, right? That were otherwise largely sold as single units. And a less glamorous but cool example is Clean, who are a TikTok native cleaning brand in our beloved category. We're able to get a lot of direct feedback from their customers that I think their new dishwasher cleaning product was okay in dishwashers, but it was great in washing machines, and that it was a totally new use case that they hadn't really uncovered, and it helped them adapt their product assortment to meet this new need. This is slightly duplicative. We covered Dubai chocolate, but again, look out for those viral moments, and reacting to them is just a good way of elevating your profile. So before I hand over to Ed, I will leave you with a thought about what being brave on TikTok really means. I think a lot of brands get a little bit nervous about ceding too much brand control to a creator community. Every brand or many brands have their idea of who their customer is and what they look like, and maybe ideally how they would talk about the brand, just like you did in that initial meeting. And I think taking the big gulp of air and letting creators and your creator communities talk authentically to their followers about your product in ways that maybe you didn't expect can be both beneficial for your broader business as a whole, but can be so effective in driving sales and following and building up your presence on the platform. Now, I'm going to hand over to Ed to talk through the next section, and we will hopefully have time, 5 minutes or so, for some questions at the end as they arise. But for now, thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Cheers, hello. Great to be here. So yeah, I'm Ed. I've been working in TikTok Shop for the last 2 years or so, primarily in the FMCG category, but I've actually moved to like the partnership side of the business now. But when I was in the FMCG category, I worked a lot on strategies, like I suppose directly with sellers. I also helped a lot on like the kind of advertising side, and then live streaming was one of the areas I focused on as well. So funnily enough, before coming to TikTok Shop, I was actually a seller on the platform. So I set up the TikTok Shop for the previous business I worked in, which was in the health supplement space. So it gave me a bit of a unique perspective of having to actually figure the platform out from the outside and then getting to come to the inside and like getting to break down exactly like what sellers need to do to be successful. So I'm going to talk about it as a couple of kind of key like topics today. And just to give, I suppose, more color on like the platform in the kind of marketplace as a whole, it's not just going to be kind of about advertising. So the first area I'm going to talk about is this kind of like halo impact of TikTok Shop. And essentially, as George described it, this like impressions engine that like TikTok is. So like at the minute, there's like more than I think 30 million like monthly active users on the platform, which means that you can really reach like anyone in the UK essentially in terms of like demographics, age profile, etc. So yeah, that's one area we're going to talk about, and then the other area is going to be probably more to do with like AI and how it's changing, I suppose, some of the roles that some of the brands that we work with on the platform have, and how it's actually blending into some of our like ads products, and I suppose the impact that it's driving and how we're using AI to make the seller experience a lot more straightforward. So to talk about the halo impact first, so. Yeah, essentially my misconception before I joined TikTok Shop was that it was going to completely like over-index with like Gen Z and that we wouldn't necessarily reach all different parts of the population. And that, from like now being on the inside, I can tell you is like completely not true. And like every different like part of the demographic, there's a huge amount of users. And I think the anecdotes that sell that, I think George already mentioned that 8% of the toilet paper in the UK was at one point sold on TikTok, which is definitely not the Gen Z market that are buying toilet paper in their droves. And then I think secondly, we've also seen some like kind of secondhand luxury retailers. So like there's been handbags that have sold for over £10,000 on like a TikTok Shop live. So I think that shows you that there is a lot of different customers on TikTok, which means the breadth of what you can do either creatively on like a TikTok strategy or a TikTok Shop strategy is like super varied. So in terms of the kind of more actually like measuring of this like halo impact, it's a very nice thing to say, but how do we actually see any like proof of it? In the work that I'm doing now in partnerships, I'm working very closely with Phosphor, who are essentially they're an independent third party, but they work on like measurements. So they do cross-channel like attribution. So they will look at all the different like e-commerce sites that like a seller or brand is using, and they will look at where the impressions, where the clicks generate, and where the sales actually occurring, to essentially tie the value of right, we're driving attention on TikTok, but the sales are occurring on Shopify and retail, etc. And they've just done a 6-month piece of work looking at our new ads product, which I'm going to speak about in a minute. And in that 6 months, they worked with like 10 sellers quite closely. And the unified return on the ad spend that sellers were seeing off the platform was about 3 times what they actually would see on the platform, which is something that like anecdotally we've heard time and time again. But this is kind of a third-party validation that there is a lot happening because of TikTok, because it's driving that top of funnel, that awareness piece, and then conversions are essentially happening elsewhere. So I don't actually have any slides on it today, which is a bit disappointing, but we're doing this piece of work with Phosphate. In the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll be publishing that on like LinkedIn, etc. And I'll encourage everyone to take a look at it, because for me, it's one of the, I think, really strong parts of the value proposition of why you should have a TikTok strategy. I know like there's not just e-commerce people in the room. I think if you're not on TikTok, you really have to ask yourself why, because if you're trying to drive awareness about your business, there's certainly like awareness to be driven there. So that's the, I suppose, bit about the kind of like the halo impact. And then the second thing I'm going to talk about is, I suppose, how AI is starting to change what like our sellers actually have to do on the platform. So in the last few weeks, there's been a kind of release like in the kind of AI world where Anthropic have brought out like Claude Cowork, which is essentially now a new AI solution that is allowing brands to, rather than like doing all the tinkering and managing of all their ad campaigns for their digital platforms, it is essentially taking all that work away. It is managing which creative should be in ad groups for you. It is like tinkering around with your budgets, all which was like incredibly time intensive. And what's quite interesting is that TikTok actually front ran that by roughly 12 months with the introduction of GMV Max. So GMV Max, as I used to describe it about 12 months ago, is essentially like ChatGPT for ads. That reference seems completely like outdated now in this day and age. But essentially what it does is, I don't know how many people in the room have ever ran ads, but every business kind of needs an ad strategy at this point. So when you're running ads in like a hands-on manner, you have to look at the creatives, you have to look at like the engagement that those creatives are driving. So like, what is the underlying stats? Are people watching the video? Where are they dropping off? Are people clicking the video? Are they trying to consider what you're talking about, finding out more? Are people ending up on your website? So all of these like individual stats are super, super important. And so the previous role of sellers on TikTok Shop more specifically was they would have to look at the engagement of their videos. They would have to look at the click-through rate. They'd have to look at the conversion rate of all those videos. And you can imagine like some of the sellers on our platform, when they're using these kind of like affiliate strategies, when they're working with lots of creators in the UK, they might have more than 30,000 videos coming out every month from creators. So at some point, it actually becomes like completely not feasible to actually look at every creative in isolation and try to figure out where you should actually be putting more of your ad spend. So this was a very, I think, obvious use case for AI, but it's been something that we've been using on the platform for, about 12 months now. And essentially, it just does all those individual bits of tinkering in a completely automated manner. And I think why that's powerful is, like we've seen examples in the past where like a shop, for example, might have had a viral video on like a Friday afternoon or a Saturday morning. And the realistic nature of like how we all work is that like somebody won't be coming in until Monday morning, Monday afternoon to actually identify that that's happened and then put an appropriate amount of ad spend behind it, which leaves like a huge amount of incrementality essentially like on the table. So the fact that this is going on in the background and happening all the time is really, really powerful. And then how it's actually changed the roles of your like typical kind of paid media managers is that the focus has now shifted much more to the kind of creative aspect. So we've seen this massive spike in the last 12 months where the kind of, I suppose, out-of-the-box thinking, which is always happening on TikTok, has really spiked from our brands. And there isn't really a very, I suppose, like kind of simple strategy to take now because the advertising side of things has been quite like democratized. And now the return that you're going to be able to drive on the platform is really, really anchored to how creative you're being and like the different tactics you're trying essentially. So there's just a kind of quick example to show you, I suppose, what the before and the after was. Like the before for advertising meant you had to manage up to kind of 4 different advertising products on TikTok Shop specifically. And I think George mentioned these different areas where like sales occur on our platform now. But rather than having to manage like 3 different products, you're now only managing 1, and the only split between those 2 products is one is live and one is non-live. So it's given a huge amount of time back to people, and we have some like kind of case studies to basically demonstrate like how overnight it kind of made a massive, massive difference to businesses, which I'm sure will now start to happen on all the other advertising platforms. And one of the, I suppose, unique bits about TikTok and why it's, I suppose, different to other channels is that there's no pay-to-play element on TikTok really. So the way I described it when I was working with sellers is that there's essentially 4 or 5 kind of organic levers that you have to pull to get relevance with this almost like black box algorithm. So you have to create your own content. You probably need to work with like creators. You probably need to explore live, and then you need to make sure you've got a compelling product that's at the right price point versus the competitors on the platform. And without doing all those things, you can't just come to the platform with a ton of ad spend and then just try to drive a result. If you don't have that relevance in the algorithm, it won't know who to bring you to, essentially. And I think the really important thing with advertising, which I think leans into every part of advertising, is that ads will only amplify like what is happening organically. If you haven't done the right things organically, no amount of money is going to change that outcome. It's not going to change the customer experience of how people are viewing what you're trying to sell. Like, you really need to get that engagement very fundamentally. And I think with this kind of like the level of AI optimizations that we've had in the last 12 months or so, that's only becoming, I think, more and more important, that you really need to get your organic strategy right to have a chance at like actually like really engaging people on the platform. So a couple examples of like, I suppose, the differences made in like really short form. So this is like one health supplement seller that we worked with in the United States. And what's really interesting is that they didn't change anything else in their business except going from a non-AI driven ads model to an AI driven ads model. So I think that shows you very clearly that there's just a level of optimization or efficiency that your business just might not necessarily have. And I think it's just a really, really powerful example of how, I suppose, easily it is to unlock now in this kind of day and age. And then another seller that we had as well, it points just to another fact on like the time saving. And this is kind of leans into what I'm talking about in terms of the creative element and people having much more time to actually create on the platform. So they reported like 10 hours saved weekly. And that's one seller on the platform. But again, like I mentioned before, we have other businesses with 40,000 like affiliate videos coming out per month. So if it saved these guys 10 hours, it might have been 40 hours for another business on the platform. So yeah, it's super, super powerful in terms of like what it's driven. And I'm personally just very, very positive that it's actually allowing more like creativity to take place, because I think in e-commerce, there was a bit of a problem not a problem, but like paid advertising was almost a little bit gatekept in like the industry in its early days. And the difference between the brands that did well versus didn't do well was sometimes just like a layer of ads knowledge. And I think for small like SMEs that are just trying to get started out, and I've worked with like a lot of them, advertising is very foreign. It doesn't like make a lot of sense. It doesn't lean into your skill sets, especially if you're a product person or a brand person. Like how you run paid advertising can be very, very difficult. So I think these kind of solutions are really democratizing the access to, like, it basically allows more people to become an e-commerce founder overnight, which I think is incredibly positive, and it's something that we're already seeing. So yeah, that's kind of the main point on that. So yeah, I think we're going to switch over to some questions now.
Yes. Thank you, Ed. So I think we have 7 minutes left, according to the clock in front of us, and I hope that there's a roaming microphone around the room. So if there is indeed. So if there are questions that you guys have for us, we have a few minutes to try to answer them. There are hands raised, which is nice.
Hi, I'm Emma from Embrace Serenity. I know a few TikTok shop sellers, and I've heard concerns about AI-led decisions overriding seller evidence, refunds being issued despite proof of tracking, and long delays releasing funds, which can be difficult to manage for a small business to manage. Are there any plans to give small businesses more control of their own business and human support to actually be provided on TikTok Shop?
I'll try answering that the quick way, is that we are indeed leveraging technology to make the best possible decisions across for both sellers and customers. It sounds like there have been cases where there might have been decisions that we agree with made by with some AI governance, that we generally have human moderation that is supporting and reviewing so many of these cases that right now they're really working in tandem. I think there are very often examples of decisions being made that a particular seller won't necessarily agree with. So there are endless plans to improve this. I think when we look at a lot of AI governance across so many businesses, we're at that formative stage where there may well have been kinks in these examples, or incorrect decisions being made in those instances. Those should be being reviewed, and we always give sellers the opportunity to appeal. So I would not imagine that the AI is causal to the end results, but it's certainly a key part of the process. There's one over here.
Hello, my name's Joanna. For the international e-commerce sellers, when are you planning on opening TikTok Shop in Australia?
In Australia, I don't know. I know we have been making major strides across Europe. We have a lot of Australian brands that are selling well into various other TikTok shops, but I don't know, and I must say, even if I did know, I probably wouldn't say if it's not yet announced. So, our marketplace expansion is a huge part of our growth plans, and Australia is obviously not a trivial market, so I'm sure there's a conversation. It's not what I'm in, I'm afraid. There are various hands over here.
Hi there. I just wondered if it's probably not your area, business to business, what's the latest on that?
Do you mind clarifying what?
Yeah.
It's a big area.
Yeah, sorry, I know that. So for corporates, I mean, we're out to corporate buyers, so I was just here out of intrigue, to be honest, not really expecting to get any real knowledge. But I just wanted to know, I mean, I have heard of, I'm trying to think of what the product is called now, but a financial product that's been able to sell to customers, so business customers. So it's about businesses selling to businesses. And I just wondered if there was any, maybe it's a colleague of yours, whether you could signpost us to how that's happening.
Yeah, I must say, I certainly know of a lot of, given the size of the audience, I'm more consumer-facing, as you surmised, and so the specific products you're talking about, I'm not qualified to. I do know we see a lot of B2B brands who heavily leverage ads and brand content on the platform to reach their clients. Given we have such penetration of the Gen Pop, that will include a lot of those clients. But that particular product, I'm not sure. So we'll have to put that one to the side.
I think just to add to that, I think there has been like a little bit of a shift anyway, where I think businesses are realizing that the level of awareness driven on TikTok is so pivotal that like it's almost a place where like you need to play. And something I've seen like super recently is that a lot of these like Y Combinator backed startups are really, really pushing on TikTok to just drive awareness about what their product is, how much money they've raised. And I think they're targeting the full swathe of investors, potential customers, and then just maybe like use cases for their product as well. So I think there's a shift happening there already, but in terms of what the exact product is, like don't have an answer for you on that, unfortunately.
We have time, I'm told, for one more, and I have noticed your hand raised at the front. So if we can get a microphone over here, if possible, you can be our final question. It's not. I can repeat the question to the room if you like, if it's not working. No, but ask the question and I'll repeat it.
Perhaps this is a naive question. I'm very concerned that the average use time is 118 minutes a day. Is there anyone in TikTok who is concerned about health and well-being and managing that trend and greater time on it?
So the question, for those that couldn't hear, is I shared a stat earlier that the average time spent on the app every day is 118 minutes, and whether we're concerned or engaged in making that to be a healthy number. That is one where I think there are a number of us that want to have TikTok complement a healthy lifestyle and find myriad ways to address our own screen time, myself included. I don't know what the concrete product level actions are done to try to reduce that on our side. We're largely focused about making sure that customers and people, while they're in this app, are being entertained. But there is a much larger conversation, I think particularly we're seeing with younger age demographics, of how we introduce better controls. It's certainly I know it's a live topic of conversation among various teams. It's slightly outside of my sphere of influence, I'm afraid. But yes, it's a very valid question. I do believe that's all we've got time for. So thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for listening and for your time. And enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Thank you.